What's up, guys? Welcome back to Lives Vivas. This is not a Viva in the car, but we're doing some sick intro. This is our guest, Hogan!
Hi.
Yeah, Sarah, welcome. Hogan, say hi to Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
And want my content. So this was actually my favorite Viva week out of the year so far. And the question was, what were the ramifications of the Puritan Revolution? So, although today Christians view Puritans and their movement as this peaceful group who wanted to purify the Catholic Church, and popular culture looks at them as these violent witch hunters, the Puritan Revolution prepared the world to enter the Age of Reason. And it did this through religion, culture, and politics. So let's dive in. So religious. So they made this lasting bitterness between the branches of the Reformation in the English-speaking world. So they, again, were very against Catholicism and the papacy. And they were not really Puritans, but they were like more Puritan than Catholic, but they were like their own group. So they really created this division between the groups. If we look at the history of the Puritan movement, they were founded by Henry VIII, who created this Puritanism along with the Anglican Church, which is interesting because the Anglican Church is mostly Catholic because with like Protestant theology, because Henry VIII he wanted to stay Catholic, but the church wouldn't divorce him. So he was like, well, I guess I'll make my own church called the Anglican Church, which is basically like Catholic everything except for the theology was a little different, and gave him power instead of the popes. So he was a very big part in this. Queen Elizabeth wanted to bring peace and unity to both the Catholic and Calvinistic branches of the church. So she allowed for, her church was very Catholic worship and Catholic style, and then they had Calvinistic theology. And then King James, he was raised Protestant, but however, he was kind of like wish-washy, and so the Puritans actually really didn't like him because they were like, he's just wish-washy and doesn't really do anything. So no one really liked King James. He was a no-go. So he wasn't really hardcore, so they were just kind of like, we're not a fan. So they actually saw him as an enemy, but his Bible translation, really bridged the gap between the conservatives and the Puritans. And then lastly, we have King Charles and the Archbishop Lowada? I'm not saying that right. But they thought that monarchy in the church was God-given. And anyone who disagreed with the anarchy of the church was going against what the Bible had said. So they were really for the papacy and just the church hierarchy. So what was the Puritan theology, you might ask? Well, it was very simple. They believed in godly people were the people who were sober, they were hardworking, and they were responsible. They believed that the English society was really corrupt and they needed to be purified, especially the Catholic Church. Catholicism undermined and underappreciated the personal relationship that you could have with God, and they put the Pope in between you and God, and so they didn't believe in the Pope. They didn't like that. Election versus predestination, which is kind of the Calvinist, or kind of where Calvinism comes into play. But they believed in predestination, which is that, hang on, I need a chair. Which is that, that's better, okay. Which is that, predestination was, they believed that God elected people and chose people to be saved, and that not everybody was chosen or elected. So they thought of that, they saw that. They had a really huge value and emphasis on education. They were very intolerant, and they believed that worship should not have all this like crazy stuff. So they just believed that worship should be very plain. They didn't want art. They didn't want the whole production. They just wanted to worship Jesus. So Calvinism was really enrooted in this doctrine. And there's 5 steps to Calvinism. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about them. But there was total depravity of man, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible and prevalent grace, and perseverance of the saints. So that is kind of what they believed and what they thought of. There were these things called the Bishop Wars from 1639 to 1640, and it was basically there was conflict between Scotland and England and their churches. So the Scottish reaction against, they did not like King Charles, who is the guy who I talked about a little earlier, but he really just believed in the hierarchy of the church, and he thought that anything against that was wrong. So the Scottish people, though, they did not like him. They were against him. And their first attempt to kind of reform the Scottish church was to kind of take back it, and they were called the Conventers, and they got total domination of the political and religious force in Scotland. So King Charles, he did not have funds to really try to get Scotland back under his reign, and he also did not have the support. However, the Conventer army was strong, and they were well organized, and they were able to kind of take back the Scottish church. So then they wound up negotiating a truce for peace, and it was called the Pacification of Berwick. So that was kind of that, but this is Colonel Norwood says, quote, that a very considerable number of nobility, clergy, and gentry so circumcised did fly from their native country as from a place infected with the plague. So they did not like King Charles. They wanted their church to be more Calvinist and more, the Puritans really kind of led this movement into rebelling from the Catholic Church. Our second point is culture. So the Puritans really influenced culture. They had an enforcement of vice laws and the separation of church and state and education. The Puritans had this really strong belief in work ethic, because they thought that was really godly. And so they had this belief in predestination, but it also created this self-awareness of kind of like, how good are you? They believed that scripture would help you live the most godly life possible. So they could only achieve this through self-discipline and just self-awareness and hard work. Max Weber was a sociologist, and he thinks that this way of religion really shaped the individualism that we see in modern America today, because they were really a main group that kind of came over from England to America. And so we really see this individualism rise out of the Puritan faith. So individualism centers or creates self-reliance, privacy, and mutual respect in today's world, and even probably back then. So the Puritans really uphold this not uphold it, but they really keep this anti-authority kind of thing, because they didn't like the hierarchy and stuff in the church, and so they just wanted to take the Pope down, and they wanted to bridge the gap between God and man, and have personal relationships with God versus going through the church and the Pope. So their personal values were stressed, and the soul became more free and independent, and more, again, self-awareness and just hardworking, and individualistic, their wealth, they believed that wealth was a sign that God blessed you, and that God blessed you in this life, then he would bless you and you were special in the next life. And so they believed that a sign of wealth was kind of like a sign that you were chosen or predestined to go to heaven. Benjamin Franklin really promoted these values in early America. And they believed education to also be really centered on the Bible, and they really wanted it centered on the Lord. And they thought more that, education, you can learn everything, and everything there is truth, and you can find God's truth in, science, Latin, writing, reading, whatever. So they really believe that should be the foundation of your education. This goes kind of back to Luther, and he says, quote, "Above all, the foremost reading for everybody, both in the universities and in the schools, should be the Holy Scripture. I would advise no one to send his child where the Holy Scriptures were not supreme," end quote. So again, this kind of goes back to the Reformation and Luther, and they just believe that their education, their values, their hard work should all be focused on the Bible and the Lord. We can see this kind of with the science in the Puritanism. So Puritans opened public schools. They were the first ones to open public schools because they wanted education to be available to everyone. They believed that learning was a great way to get connected to the Lord. They wanted to nurture and grow children's faith along with their educational minds, but they also wanted to really grow their faith. And school was originally promoted for that, public schools, which shocking. So in 1635, they opened the first formal school called Roxbury Latin School. And then in 1639 was the first American college that we still have today called Harvard. In 1647, the Massachusetts laws said that towns of 50 families had to have an elementary school, and then towns of 100 had to have a grammar school, which kids could learn Latin from and go on to college through that. So let's get into our last point, which is politics, the political view of the Puritanism and how they really shaped that. So Puritanism was this idea of removing Catholic tradition from Anglican worship. They had this distinct political vision, which originally started as a theocratic republicanism, which was the system kind of founded on scripture, more focused on the Lord. And then later it kind of turned into totalitarianism. Which I actually have to look that up and add that in because I'm not sure what that is. But under the Puritan rule, politics spread through the educational system, and their government was really regulated in small aspects of life. So it's interesting because the Puritans really wanted freedom from the church, but at the same time, they really impressed government into the small aspects of daily life, and they really wanted control when it came to the political side. So they banned sports, athletic sports, and they also banned Christmas, which is kind of sad. So they were really, invested in politics. On the Mayflower, they made a Mayflower Compact in 1620, which was kind of the early birth of an American democracy. And so they gave the right to self-govern and make decisions that were based on the majority of the vote. So they were really the ones who created majority wins, not minorities. We can see this in the American Revolution. The American Revolution ideas were really put forward by the Puritans during the English Civil War. They tried to bring back the English Commonwealth from 1649 to 1660. And they also wanted to restore Puritan style of the Republican government. So this is a quote by Samuel Adams. And it says, quote, "I could not help fancying that the Stamp Act itself was contrived with design only to incur the people to the habit of contemplating themselves as the slaves of men, and the translation thence to subjection to Satan is mightily easy," end quote. So this really shows that during the American Revolution that the Puritans saw politics as a spiritual battlefield, and they saw it as a struggle against the papacy, and more kind of like politics and religion were kind of together when it came to that. So yeah, they really just saw that politics were important. They saw culture was important, education was important, religion was obviously important. And so although, you know, today as Christians, we see the Puritans as these peaceful, you know, group who wanted to purify the Catholic and Anglican Church, and popular culture really looks at them as these evil witch hunters, who just killed people brutally. The Puritan Revolution really prepared the modern world to enter this age of reasoning and thinking. And it again did this through religion, culture, and politics. So that is it for this week's Viva. It was very interesting. For sure my favorite one so far. Can't wait to learn more. And yeah, thanks for watching this, Sarah. Bye.
We're starring in a vlog. Sorry. This is going to be fascinating. We're going to talk about folders in the iCloud because Hogan needs one now.
Okay, get started.
Okay. So, Hagen. Oh, wait, I'm on the wrong page. Here we go. So this is where you normally, this is ridiculous. Can you not take that?
Hogan likes
No,
it.
this is what I do. I literally.
I know. Stop.
Look, I'll show you
Get
what I
your
do.
grubby hands off. Stop.
Call me grubby. You call me that 2 days in a row.
Because they're sticky.
Right there.
I know.
Okay, well, this is a goodbye outro. See you guys later. Thanks for watching on Los Vivas. I hope you guys learned a lot about Puritans, and a little bit about my brother and Baba. See you guys next time. See you tomorrow, Sarah. Thanks for watching this. Hopefully I'll get a fish video coming soon. Bye.